Well, welcome to Lap 15 of the Women Shifting Gears virtual driven by Hemmings. As you can tell, we are in a very special location for tonight's virtual, so thank you all for joining us from around the country. It is without a doubt one of the most intriguing episodes I think we have done. First off, we're sitting at the Fox Sports studio, but also about the lady that we're going to discuss over the next hour with all of you. This is going to be focused on a story called Boundless. It is about the first lady of first, Betty Skelton. To introduce our panel tonight, the makers and creators behind this docuseries that will air on Fox Sports. To my left, I have Pam Miller. She's an 8-time Emmy Award-winning producer. You guys know our super connector, Cindy Sisson. She also had a large hand in this project as well. And the Vice President of Production, Lindsey Mandia, joins us on set as well. Before we dive into this story, though, I think we should hear a few words from Betty herself, maybe.
She was a star.
She had it all. She was a daredevil.
She was definitely a motorhead and a speed freak.
Earned the nickname the fastest woman on earth.
NASCAR's growth spurt in the 50s was fueled by its fans' passion for speed and dreams of sports cars. Speed Weeks was the big stage to prove you were the best automobile. Among the male drivers, there was a female that was fearless in her quest for speed. Her name was Betty Skelton, a 3-time aerobatic champion before she raced on the beach. When Betty grabbed the wheel, NASCAR would change forever.
I had a charter flight to fly 3 famous race drivers for Bill France Sr., who then was just getting NASCAR started. He said, "How would you like to come down to Daytona for Speed Week?" And I said, "Well, what is Speed Week?"
Every February, NASCAR would organize something called NASCAR Speed Weeks. It's just an opportunity to just prove the performance of your car. You know, whether you're a manufacturer or a race car builder or whatever.
I've heard many times that Bill France Sr. was very open-minded. If you do something different, it's going to grow your business.
He explained to me what NASCAR was doing with speeds in Daytona. And I said, "Well, sure, I'd love to come, but I'd have to have a sponsor." 6 months later, he called and said, "I have your sponsor."
Bill was so impressed with Betty and her credentials that he recommended her initially to Dodge, and she started with Dodge in '54.
She immediately makes headlines. She breaks a speed record right away.
Then I became a little restless and I got very interested in the Corvette.
Betty Skelton upholds the honor of women drivers everywhere with her record-breaking Corvette.
The beach run was an attempt to establish a 2-way record average speed on Daytona Beach.
It was important at the time, proving that you had the fastest car, the most durable car, the car that could win.
The speed, I think was somewhere around 143, 44 miles an hour, the average speed. It was a new record for women.
That was a lot of speed back then in 1956. She was truly remarkable.
When she set speed records on the beach alongside Zora and John Fitch, every woman in America that knew she had done that knew that Betty Skelton was doing something that only men had done before, and she just broke that barrier.
She was a different woman. About everything that she ever touched and did, she did it better than the rest of us.
Well, if you're going to play a game, you want to play with the big boys. I mean, you want to get with the top people in an industry.
Well, it shows how competitive she was. If she was going to drive cars, she was going to drive what she thought were the best cars. I don't think any other woman in history has had the kind of impact she had.
Without Betty behind the wheel of the Corvette, without Betty behind the marketing of Corvette, Corvette would not have gotten the attention it did during the late 50s and through the 60s. And I think that would have put Corvette in a much different place.
Betty Skelton's accomplishments rewarded her with honors in 10 Halls of Fame, spanning across aviation and motorsports. Fearless and determined, gifted with skill and charm, everything Betty accomplished forged a path for the newest heroines of NASCAR.
Fearless and determined. If that isn't a quote that sums up Betty Skelton, but I'm sure, like the rest of you, just your jaws dropped on what Betty has accomplished. At the beginning of that video, it was mentioned that Betty was a 3-time aerobatic champion. And that's not all, Pam. I know that Betty had a list of accomplishments. That video, we focused on Betty's more the automobile side and NASCAR side, but gosh, that was just a scratch of the surface for her.
Oh my gosh, she had 17 aviation and automobile records, more than anybody, male or female, in history. She's in 10 halls of fame. I mean, she's every day, even today, I learned something new about Betty. It's like it's just an endless discovery.
When I started looking over research on Betty, as we see there, but she did her first solo in an airplane at 12.
Yeah, and she did it without her mother knowing, and her father told her not to tell her mother. And then she ends up kind of confessing, and her mother was like, heck, I'll take a flying lesson too. And the whole family flew.
Where do you think her drive of aviation came from?
Well, she was always growing up around near an air base, and so she was around planes a lot. And her father was interested in it, and they took lessons as a family, and they made it a family thing. Her parents were really young, and they encouraged her. Her father always told her, just keep flying, keep practicing, and just be safe.
I think it's important to point out that Betty was born in 1926. So when you think of that time and the idea that here you have this young girl that is wanting to be a pilot, can you even imagine how she convinced people to make this happen?
Well, I think it was easy because her father was so supportive of anything she wanted to do, and he was into cars, he was into planes, he was into anything that moved. It sounded like trains. He had worked on a train before he got into aviation. He ended up owning a FBO at the airbase or at the airport. So, I mean, she was around it all the time, and I think that made a huge difference. And she was going to school, and she was in plays, and she was going to dances. She was still living, but she was doing all this other stuff.
Well, I know we're going to dive deep more into Betty's story, but I want to go back to the beginning of all of this for the three of you. You guys worked collectively on this project. Pam, I know it kind of inspired you. You came across something about Betty, but before that, why is this project even possible?
No.
Cindy?
I think it's a lot to do with Pam and I had been friends for about 30 years in the industry. And as she said earlier today, with COVID, you wanted to reconnect and find meaningful relationships. So one day I said, hey, Pam, let's have lunch. And we went to 131 Main. We've been there about 1,000 times since on this project. And the first thing she said to me, I'll just remember this, she sat down in the chair and she goes, I know, Cindy, you're focused on women in automotive, but Mike Joy and I want to do a feature on Joan Cuneo Newton. When I said, well, that's funny because I want to do a feature on Aloha Wanderwell. And Aloha, is the first woman. She's the Amelia Earhart of the automotive space. She, at age 16, drove around the world in a Ford. And so we just started riffing with each other on, let's start this series. We call it Left Behind. And over Christmas, I think it was.
Yeah, I just started diving in.
Yeah, we started reading all their books, and we'd be texting, oh, what about this, what about this, what about this? And
then it became, all of a sudden, it connected. Like, I found the lady with the gold Corvette. And I thought, I've seen this picture, but I didn't know much about her, like everybody else. And, I think it motivated us. I think that reconnection motivated us to just search for women that we found interesting, that we knew that the world needed to know about.
You said that earlier when we were getting ready, the lady with the gold Corvette. Who's the lady with the gold Corvette?
Well, it's Betty. I mean, but the people that created the gold Corvette were like the Mount Rushmore of GM. I mean, it was, Bill Mitchell, it was Harley Earl, it was Zora Duntov. I mean, these guys created this Corvette for her, which is unheard of because they respected her so much.
I love that it became synonymous with her, and when you found that, she became the first lady of first, not only in her own right, but also for this documentary series. Lindsay, I imagine your role into this, they have this idea, they come to you. How did you come into play?
Yeah, Pam and I obviously worked together at Fox Sports, and she told me, she said, I have to introduce you to my friend Cindy. I have to tell you about this woman, Betty. And so we went to lunch, again, 131 Main, lots of lunches at 131 Main. And they start telling me about Betty, and I just think, my gosh, people need to know her story. Man, woman, it doesn't matter. This is incredible, right? And NASCAR is a huge part of Fox, and so much of Betty's story is about NASCAR and what she accomplished in that space. And so for me, it was a no-brainer from that aspect of just editorially, it makes sense for us. But then obviously to be able to tell a story that celebrates a woman and what she's accomplished, I feel like that is a passion of mine and so important to me. And so it was a no-brainer. It made sense. So then it was, okay, let's figure out how we do this. We don't necessarily have
Peter to pay for it.
and so we did, and it's been this awesome journey we're on. It's kind of crazy to think that this thing is airing here in
I know. I feel like I'll lose an appendage. Like Betty's been so part of it. Plus we've had so much fun brainstorming creatively, finding nuggets of her story to tell. We call each other up and go, oh my God, I found this, or I'll send Lindsay a picture in the middle of the night, like, hey, look at this. And every day it
was really cool. Pam would find, I feel like she ordered and dug up so many different magazines. And I remember one lunch, she brought these magazines, and I'm like, oh, I don't even know if I should have food. Like, I'm going to spill something on this. And it was, but they were, it was incredible to go through and see. Also very revealing. I think for me, you forget that this wasn't that. It was, but it wasn't that long ago, right? We're talking about 40s, 50s, 60s. And when you read those articles, the very first thing they do is describe a woman's appearance, right?
Sure.
The words and language used to talk about women. And I'm sitting here and I'll look at the front and I'll see like, wow, that was like 56. And it's kind of shocking. And I think for me, it's a good reminder that this wasn't that long ago. You need to realize the women that came before you, whether it's in sports or in the TV space or just in general, to ensure that we all have the rights and doors are open the way they are. That was very educational and good for me. And then also hopeful in a way of realizing how far we have come, because Betty did those things. I can have the job I have today, and that's just been a great part of it.
And when to Lindsay's point, when you see headlines that say "female of the species" or "she went 300 miles an hour, but her nail broke," those are legit headlines, right? And you sit there and you read more and more into it, and you're thinking, every picture of her in one of the aviation magazines, shows her in a roller coaster with an army guy. Like, why couldn't she just be in the roller? It's just all these things, and you read more and more. Everything had a caveat to it. Mm-hmm. But then you realize, to Lindsay's point, when you read the articles, how far she was pushing the limits, right? She was constantly making the bar go up. And she was taking that inch where she, might not have gone. Like, she never hesitated to dive through a door to get to the next thing. She knew she wasn't necessarily going to get the equal chance with the men, but she was going to push it as far as she could.
She reminds me a lot of Lynn St. James. When you bring up Lynn's name, the industry just Googles all over her because they did it the same way. They didn't go in brashly and you owe me this and I'm a woman, so I deserve this. And that's why I think Lynn is winning all kinds of awards right now, from being inducted into the Automotive Hall of Fame, and the list goes on. They are just, I told Lynn so many times, you remind me so much of Betty. And I know Lynn has a major role in this, so that means a lot.
I was going to say, we heard Lynn's voice on the opening video at the top of the show. What was her contribution? How important was that for you, Cindy?
Well, as you all know, she's my best friend, so very important. And good old Pam, my role was more digging. Pam had to come up with an idea and say, Cindy, go find this. So I called Lynn one day and said, do you have any pictures or a story or video? And, a little scratching of the head. And within, 48 hours? We not only had pictures and videos and storytelling, because Lynn inducted her into the Motorsports Hall of Fame. So it's become a very important piece to the overall story.
I think what I find fascinating as well, and it's one of the topics that we talk about on the Women Shifting Gears community, but just the way that you guys have interacted together on this. Why did this team work so well?
I don't know. I think, first of all, we all like each other. Yeah. I think, we support each other. I think that we have a creative riff, the three of us, and we all kind of have our lane, too. We all kind of know where our lane is, but we also know where to come together, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah. It was just very natural.
Yeah,
each person's skill set, and what they were going to do. And then again, I think you just have the common bond over the story, right? Just such an incredible story to get to be a part of, and that kind of motivates you and keeps you going and is the ultimate bond, I think.
It's fun to work on a project when you like everybody you're working with.
Yeah.
Well, the key for Pam, though, is you have to drink Dunkin' Donuts iced tea. Trust me, we own stock in the company now. We would go on these road trips. Well, our first trip was to the Smithsonian, and how many times did I have to run to Dunkin' Donuts? My job was to get the Dunkin' Donuts. I really had an important role. But we went on a 2-day road trip driving through Florida. We went down to visit Bill Tower, and then went to the Motorsports Hall of Fame, and then we went to see the amazing Patty Wagstaff. But there was just buckets of Dunkin' Donuts, not donuts, the tea in the back. And we loved to sing 70s songs. That was pretty cool.
Sirius XM Yacht Rock.
Yes, it's a great 311, great station.
Yes, it is.
Oh my gosh, Pam's a real good singer.
Oh yeah.
We're sitting right here at this moment, but another way that teams can bond are on the struggles. What are some of the hurdles that you guys faced during the production of this?
Gosh,
getting approvals sometimes.
To Lindsey's point, we dug really deep. I mean, we found some things that people haven't seen in 70 years that are in this film. I mean, we called people that we've known through the years, all three of us, that, just a great example was her Bonneville run. She goes, she becomes the fastest woman on earth. She runs 300 miles an hour, and nobody knows if there's a picture of it. Well, I say to Cindy, there's got to be film. Firestone has to have film. By talking to different people, you kind of get to a place, and then all of a sudden this cache of film shows up.
Thank God, Lisa Boggs.
Yeah. And then I call Lindsey and I go, oh my God, you got to see this film. And I'm saying, Cindy, oh my God, I like it. And it's crazy.
I think that's because I think what they're really after here are the stories that haven't been told, that need to be told. And so that right there on its face presents the challenge, right? If this information was easily accessible, then this would have already been done. And so I think that is the most difficult thing, is digging the story up in a way that you're not regurgitating what somebody else already did. You really are finding the facts and information.
And I think that's what makes it most fun too, is the search for that nugget, that gem that it's like nobody's seen it.
Just to add quickly, Betty did pass away in 2011, and kind of hearing you talk earlier, even you're almost helping Betty rewrite her history for her. You discovered that she was probably the first woman to interact within NASCAR when it was assumed that it could be someone different?
You mean as far as flying, like when she was flying the pilots, or
in her NASCAR era, you were saying with Bill France Sr., and that she had some roles that you discovered through photos.
Oh yeah, she was the first AAA licensed driver, female driver. The fact that she was flying, like we didn't even think that drivers really flew to races back then, but she was flying.
And as the pace car driver, right,
as a pace car, she was the person leading, the field, even though she couldn't race in the ovals, but she was racing head-to-head in speed.
That was in the Gold Corvette, too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, if anybody's listening, we are on the hunt for the Gold Corvette. It's the goose that laid the golden egg.
Where was it last seen?
What's that?
In those pictures.
Okay.
Yeah. I was at Amelia this last weekend, and there's somebody, they told me they know where it is. So I don't know if they're on tonight, but I'm going to challenge that person. I can't pay a bounty, but that if we find that car, that car and the Dodge Fire Arrow, that she first raced with Dodge, and then she went up to Detroit to the grounds to launch that. And, those two cars are mystery cars for us right now.
When you continued going through Betty's history, and what do you think drove her? What was she inspired by?
I think she was inspired by, she loved speed. She was inspired by a will to see how far she could push the envelope. I think she just had a destiny to accomplish these things. I mean, I think she just loved the challenge. There was nothing, like if she couldn't do it, she would go invent it. So like if they said you can't race against the guys, well then I'm gonna go and create a rally. She invented the 24-hour endurance runs that you see those old films of. She came up with that. Everything that she did like in the film, Paul Goldsmith says better than the guys. And the guys at that era really respected her for that. But I love her relentlessness, that the fact that they might say, no, you can't go through this door. Okay, well, if I can't go through that door, I'm going to invent something that I can go through this door, and then I'm going to get to this other point beyond, what people thought I could do. And they made it difficult for her. I think we were talking about that earlier too. Like in IndyCar, she's the first woman to drive an IndyCar, but she can't race at the speedway or drive it at the speedway because she had to run so many sprint car races and so many dirt races, and she had to do so many hours in the car, and she didn't have time. She was flying, she was doing testing for Dodge, there was other things. Plus it was like that wasn't accessible to her to get rides, that many rides. They just made it difficult.
Or even just in NASCAR, she could do, she could be a part of Speed Week and be down on the beach and do that. But she was not allowed to be on the oval because women weren't allowed to be on the oval. And again, I think for me, being someone who has grown up in a time where you want equality, but it's not that blatant, well, women are not allowed to do this. Maybe it's like a perceived tendency, but that was a time and an era where it was women cannot do this. Not like, oh, women traditionally don't do it. You're not allowed to do it. I mean, it's just...
Well, I'd like to add, I think the word that resonates with me is she had no fear. And Lindsay, to echo too, we haven't really talked about her stint in NASA. I mean, in 1960, Wally Schroz calls her up and says, hey, you need to come train with Mercury 7 and Alan Shepard and on and on and on. And she about beat the pants off the rest of the men, but because she didn't have the fighter pilot pedigree, if you will, she had plenty of airtime. Probably more airtime than most of those guys, but she didn't get to go up into
when it was
the
still
heavens.
A door that was closed, right?
Yes.
It was, can women's body, you read these articles, can women's bodies withstand what a man's body can withstand? Yeah. And like, are they physically fit to go to space? Those are the kind of things that were being discussed.
G-forces.
Yeah, which is, it's crazy. We're really talking about like women being viewed as inferior, which it's and she just, like Pam said, had this quiet way of, she wasn't yelling and screaming and banging on doors, but she found a way to create other avenues and do things that changed the culture, changed the mentality.
And she knew she wasn't going to space. I mean, she knew it when she took the test, but when you listen to Wally Funk tell the stories too, the guys were always whining about the tests. Like they were kind of mad that they had to sit there all day. I mean, she showed up, they didn't even have clothes for her to wear to do the test or shoes. She did the test in her high heels in baggy men's pajamas. She was like 98 pounds, 5 foot tall, and she's in these giant clothes, and they don't even know how to dress her to do the test, yet she passes them better than the men did. And, obviously could have earned a spot to go to space, but not to be.
We're going to start flowing in some questions from the audience that's watching, but just listening to kind of the roadblocks that she kept coming up against. Did you ever find anything on some frustrations? Was there anything that you found of hers where she audibly admitted to some of these frustrations that she kept hitting up against?
Maybe her hair sometimes. No, she was such a fashionista. I mean, one of the things we marvel about, I was going to take my shoes off, but she always flew and drove with no shoes on. You can see that in some of the imagery. I don't think there was a frustration, but she had her little quibbles that she did that were unique, or she'd wear a dress underneath her coveralls and get out of the plane or the car because she wanted to look beautiful. Can't fault her for that.
I think there were a couple times she felt like she could go faster. She felt like on the beach races on the Corvette team that the guys had a little bit better equipment than she did. We hear that all the time now from teammates. If you're in NASCAR, I mean, it's the same thing, right? But she thought that she could go faster on the beach if they gave her a little more horsepower or a little more of what the guys had. And then in the same thing with the speed run at Bonneville, they didn't put the afterburner on because they were worried about her getting out of control, and she almost did anyway. But because of that, she didn't go. She wanted to go faster than 315 miles an hour, but they didn't give her the afterburner.
There's a photo with her with the SR1, SR2, SR3, and you could even look at the grills. Her grill is different than the two men's grills. Got to look close. Bill Tower, he knows his stuff. He pointed that right out to us. Jerry Burton, I mean, so many great experts that we have had the privilege of working with on this.
I think this flows in nicely to a question from Anna. She wants to know, what's something surprising that you learned about Betty that helped change things for women?
Oh gosh, it just seemed like she knew how to reach women. Like we were talking earlier how many newspapers she was in, but she was very accessible, even for the time. Like she was out there, whether she was on radio, she was narrating her flights with a wireless headset, but she knew outreach. You see these pictures of her with children and young women, and she just seemed like she was accessible. She knew how to make herself accessible for them. And I think that helped.
And I think the way she talked and presented herself, you know, sometimes she would get asked, we have footage in the film of her on a television program, right? And men are getting asked, questions, and she gets very, women-specific questions. But the way she answers and handles and talks about herself, and they kind of want her to talk to other women as she's answering, but she just speaks in this way that I feel like if I were at the time, I would be like, yes, thank you for not dumbing down your answer or changing your answer. Or, I don't know, I think just the way she presented herself and spoke probably was its own little bit of inspiration and encouragement if you were sitting at home and not able to have the platform she did, but to see her represent women in such a strong, smart way.
And she also knew how to walk the line. Cindy mentioned her fashion. I mean, she knew how to look like a lady, act like a lady, but compete in a way that was equal, that she was trying to beat the men.
And I think she wanted to do those things. Like it seemed like she enjoyed all of those things, and what we get to hear her talk about. I'm not a huge fashionista, but it seemed like Betty was, and she was great owning that and owning flying with no shoes, She seemed very comfortable in who she was, and I think there's inspiration in that.
Yeah, and I mean, you could almost get airborne at 350 miles an hour at Bonneville and then come out of it and say, oh, I got a little out of control, but I put the car back on the ground. Oh, by the way, I had the flu while I was doing it. Like that. Those are the things that you see and you're just like, are you kidding?
What I loved was, too, Paul Goldsmith. That was such a joy for Pam and I. That was our first real interview, right? Mm-hmm. And he had a tear in his eye. I mean, he loved her. But it's the same thing with others that we spoke to. They had such respect and such admiration. She was just a woman ahead of her time.
Do you think she knew her influence?
I think so. I think she realized that she pushed the envelope for the next group to walk through. I think reading later in her years, I think, seeing some of the Hall of Fame presentations, how some of the young girls.
It'd be great to get to ask Lynn.
Lynn had a great line about the event she was in and the young girls that she introduced her to. And
I wonder if they had any conversations that
keep it a secret
led to that. Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about all the accomplishments that Betty has made in her professional life, and as women, a lot of times we identify with that aspect of ourselves. But who is Betty in her personal life?
Gosh.
Several people wanting to know that answer, by the way.
I think you could kind of there's a lot there. Let's see.
I'm going to get the tea.
I think she'll make a great soap opera someday. Let's put it that way. I think when you read her book, Little Stinker, which was written from her perspective, her autobiography about her aviation days, you really see her passion and her relationships come to life in that book. It's a very hard book to find, by the way. It's out of print. But she talks a lot about those days and the interesting men and women that she met.
But she was the plane.
But yeah, she
wasn't her. She was Little Stinker.
But she also did things like, she got a college education, right? She was the vice president of vice president of an advertising agency, the first woman. She was running around all the time in these circles of high-powered men and influencers. And I think she was a real influencer, and she knew how to balance rubbing elbows behind the scenes to advance causes. But she was social. She liked horses. She liked betting on horses. It sounded like she liked a glass of wine here and there.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak out of turn because obviously I didn't get to talk to her about this, but it just seemed like she was in plays. She was in theater. She had hobbies.
She sold real estate.
Yes.
I want to know what Betty didn't do.
I'm wondering myself, quite honestly. So
I wonder if she was a good cook.
I don't know. That's a good one. I'll have to find out.
We'll find it. I mean, every time there was like little sprinkles of Betty for the both of us. Well, for all of us, really. But there are times where the goosebumps. Like, she is telling us where to go. Telling us where to go.
I mean, this is a woman in the time that they were calling up our hairdresser saying, what's she like when you have her come in and do her hair? Like, she's in the top 10 best dressed women, best coiffed women. They were always calling people trying to find gossip on her, even years later.
Do you think she felt that pressure to present herself a certain way?
I think so.
Oh, yeah, but it's self-pressure.
Okay.
I don't think anybody was putting pressure. She was a classy lady.
I remember on the NASA video, there was a photo at the end. You said that was her least favorite photo of herself.
The cover of Look magazine, of all things. But she had been training all day. She'd been taking the tests. And she said that they rushed her out there. And she had that giant helmet on, which she liked. But then she pulled it off. She didn't have time to change, didn't have time to comb her hair, didn't have time to do anything. And they just took it.
There it is.
There it is. Yeah. And she said she hated that photo because her hair was messed up.
Things men don't think about.
Exactly. But heck, she just passed all these tests, and there she is.
And then we have a question from Julia in the audience. She wants to know, what are your hopes for the impact this documentary can make on NASCAR?
I hope that the next generation of young women realize that anything's possible, and that because of people like Betty, that they have a chance. And I think that she really did push the envelope. And also, you know, NASCAR's Bill France Sr., I mean, Lynn says it, and you saw it in the clip, I mean, very open-minded. So you know, they should feel that they have a chance to walk through that door and accomplish what they want to do in the car.
I mean, I think yes to all of that, but also just that people within NASCAR know who she is. I mean, I had no idea, right? Then Pam, along the way, even when we were in Daytona for the 500 this year, we would talk to different folks within NASCAR, and that's no fault of them. I think it really is just, again, this is a lost story. So
Left behind.
Yeah, I think it would be fantastic for people to just know who she is.
We also had a question from Ted coming in asking about the collection of this stock and the challenge that it took collecting all of the interviews and everything on Betty. In addition to that, is it over?
Oh, no.
You were saying that there's hundreds of articles tagged on Betty every day. How much more is there to still learn about?
There's so much more to learn about her. I mean, during that era, there were hundreds a day. There were syndicated articles. There were nuggets you learn every day. I learned something today. I mean, it's just, I think the story's left to be, be continued, because there's just so much more. It's impossible. I mean, this story reintroduces her, to Lindsey's point, to everybody. Hopefully NASCAR, hopefully fans beyond NASCAR, but people in NASCAR. But there is so much more.
And beyond NASCAR.
Right.
I mean, I would say 9 times out of 10, people would not know who she is. And then when you just start to tell the little story, they're like, what? I had no idea.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had people tell me, I walked into the Air and Space at the Smithsonian, and I saw that little red plane. I didn't realize that was her plane. Her plane greets you as you walk into the Air and Space Museum.
We want everybody to know who Little Stinker is.
This is a question to each of you. What did you learn about yourself putting this together?
My God, who are submitting these thought-provoking questions? And do you want a job at Fox?
You go first.
Gosh, I think this was a different and unique project. I think that we were talking to our PR team today. I think it's the first documentary that Race Hub has produced themselves internally. Usually we partner with companies. So I think for me, and the practicality of doing it is just perseverance, and professionally for me, just opening up a new gear, if you will, of how to get things done. I learned a lot about how to get things done and get a different style of project done.
Sandy?
For me, it just was such a blessing to work with Pam and Lindsey on this. And Amanda, I want to do a shout out to you with what we do with our weekly podcasts, and Tina Budd, who's helps produce all of this. It just showed, again, teamwork makes the dream work. But what I sent an email to my family. I don't know if any of them are on. And I said, this is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. because I never thought I'd be producing a documentary, but it's truly been an honor to work hand in hand. Girl, we spent a lot of time together, but it's been awesome.
I think the collaboration's been really fun. It's different because, as Lindsay knows, she and I do live TV all the time, and doing something that's historical, bringing someone back to life, bringing someone back into everybody's consciousness and discussion is a fun thing. But I just love the collaboration part of it and the storytelling part, and getting to share it with the three of us together.
Yeah, and I mean, all the things that may sound stereotypical, but Betty just inspires you.
Yeah.
So to every day be engaged with and working on a story of, again, like the perseverance. I feel like the whole project, just perseverance for me, because I feel like that's what she was all about. And I don't know.
I like the mystery and challenge of it too, because I'd read something and it would go spark an idea, and then I'd go through that door and try to find somebody who might have that answer, right? And then I'd call this one over here and say, do you know this person? How do we get to this person? Or I would, try to, and then it would lead down all these, like, it was a giant maze of trying, and every time I would find another angle and digging up some of the old cool footage and the cool articles. For me, that was just kind of the cool part of it, just the hunt, right?
I'm told your sister is watching.
Oh, hi, Lisa.
What do you think Betty would make of all this documentary?
I personally think she'd be thrilled.
Sitting right here.
I think she deserves. I think she'd finally say, "Finally."
Sure.
Because how I've asked people, why do you think she's fallen off the radar? Why? And their thought is she was involved in so many things that it's hard to place her in one lane. But I think she'd be really happy.
Oh, yeah. I hope we get to make a major motion picture out of this. We're just still trying to figure out who would play Betty. That's a good question. Who do you think would?
No idea.
No.
It's like
Sandra Bullock just retired yesterday. I was kind of hoping it was her.
What about you, Linz? What do you think?
Who would play Betty?
What do you think Betty would think of all this?
Would think of all of this? I would hope that she would be really proud of this, and see it as a celebration of all women. But I don't know. I feel like I'm just inserting my opinion.
But I think she'd be happy
if
3 women worked together on it.
I think she would love the collaboration. Again, the inspiration and hopefully what it means to other women. But I don't know. I really don't.
Well, we've been talking about the collection of this documentary, and the final product is almost here and ready. What can you tell us coming up about the documentary and when we might be able to see it?
Oh, okay, I guess I'm going to answer that one. You can watch this documentary on NASCAR Race Hub on FS1 March 23rd at 6 p.m. And then we'll have an encore presentation on April 9th. That will be after the Martinsville Cup race. So make sure you watch the Cup race and then tune in for a little late night viewing of it a second time. So a week from tomorrow is when you'll get to see it for the first time.
I want to thank everyone for joining us here on the Women Shifting Gears Lap 15 for Boundless, the First Lady of First, Betty Skelton. Before I let you go, though, one last question to each of you. Betty, at the end of it, was she satisfied?
Yeah. Not a chance.
I don't think so at all.
I thought you meant the end of this movie, but yes. Was she at the end? No.
You mean like the end of her life?
Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
I think she always wanted more.
Oh, absolutely wanted more.
I just want to add real quickly, I just heard that Lynn was saying in the chat that when Betty went to Daytona, she did get to meet the young drivers, and they were thrilled to meet Betty Skelton as well. Is this story over for you?
I don't
Is there an addendum? Is there a part 2 of Betty?
I don't know.
I'm looking at me.
I guess because I'm just like, I don't think it'll ever end for me, because I think I'll constantly always discover something new, because I'm constantly reading everything. And everything, she's inspired me so much that I feel like I'm constantly absorbing something about her.
Pam is also a huge fan of Amelia Earhart. Huge collection, knows, just like Betty, she knows so much. So I think there's a lot of legacy with Betty down the road. And whoever our next wonderful story we're going to tell.
And then I know I'll keep going, but one more question, I promise. What do you feel is Betty's story, Pam?
What do I feel is Betty's story. Gosh. There's so many things. I just think she's somebody who was fearless, gifted, just a woman that was destined for this, but also knew that she was going to push it as far as she could for everybody else. I guess that's kind of, I'm fumbling on that a little bit because it's hard to really put in words. I think when you watch it, you'll see why. There's so many things that you, as a woman or an aspiring pilot or driver or whatever you want to do, ad agency, school teacher, could get from a woman like Betty, that it's hard to put it into one word or one category.
Lindsey, Cindy, Pam, thank you all for your collaboration and contribution to Betty Skelton's documentary. You can see this coming up Wednesday, March 23rd on Fox Sports. That's good night from here from the Charlotte studios of Fox Sports. I'm Amanda Busick. Thank you for joining us on the Women Shifting Gears Lap 15, driven by Hemmings.